Everybody, and welcome. Hello to our audiences at the Log House Museum, and welcome to our audiences at home. This is a pleasure to have you here for our very first hybrid Words Writers Southwest Stories event. My name is Elizabeth Rudrud. I am the Programs and Community Outreach Director for the Southwest Seattle Historical Society. And I'm, again, really glad to be able to offer this program for folks that are eager to return and folks that are more comfortable at home or who live on the other side of Seattle with the traffic. And before we begin, we want to acknowledge that Southwest Seattle Historical Society and the Log House Museum are located on the traditional lands of the Coast Salish people, past and present. We are grateful for the first peoples of this region for stewarding this land throughout the generations. We also want to thank our sponsors, including For Culture, Luna Park Cafe, Home Street Bank, the Duwamish Longhouse Cultural Center, and the podcast Always West Seattle. Their generosity makes these free experiences possible for all of us. If you have not already, we encourage you to consider a donation so we can keep offering these great programs. If you'd like to know more about the Southwest Seattle Historical Society or the Log House Museum, you can visit loghousemuseum.org. And for those of you who are joining us virtually, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen, and you can submit your questions for the presentation. Our speaker will be able to see your comments. And we will also be leaving time at the end of tonight's presentation for your questions directly. And now I'm going to welcome Dora Faye Hendricks, the chair for Words Writers Southwest Stories.
I'm not sure if she said, did you say that this is the first time that we've had this joint, this is a celebration for us, that we're welcoming the audience online and a live audience here, and that's a celebration for us. But I'm here to introduce Annabelle Quintero. She's a lover of life. She holds a master's degree in education policy and leadership, a certification in holistic health, is a speaker advocate coach, and a DEI strategist. In her best-selling book, Step, Step, Jump, Transforming Trauma to Triumph from the 46th Floor, Annabelle tells of narrowly surviving 9/11 at the World Trade Center's Tower 1. Her career encompasses community engagement, health and wellness coaching, professional modeling, dancing, corporate marketing, educational policy making, and a political campaign for a state Senate seat. She has demonstrated extraordinary resilience that has come to shape her worldview and define her leadership style. The daughter of immigrant Ecuadorian parents, Annabelle is a native of Seattle and a woman of uncompromising compassion. Throughout her life, she has cultivated strong belief in personal development. Her fortitude, a strong spiritual foundation, emphasis on energetic nutrition, and passion to serve others forms the cornerstones of her life's work. She believes we're all citizens of the world. Her diverse experience as a leader, educator, and how do you say that? Entrepreneur. Thank you. Are connected by a common thread, positively impacting people's lives and championing social change. Her story is a moving narrative that has enabled her to find purpose and help change people's lives through storytelling. As a mother, a business leader, educator, and public servant. Through all her varied experiences, and she's a lifelong bee girl, a history of advocacy and balanced self-awareness. She brings a fresh lens to diversity training by integrating self-awareness of body, mind, and emotional state. As the founder of the Runa Group, she is devoted to helping leaders understand how storytelling can create safe spaces for organizational culture to evolve into diverse, inclusive spaces where employees feel like they belong, creating cultural awareness. Please help me welcome Annabelle to our Log House Museum and Word Writers.
Hi, everyone.
Oops.
I'm looking in both places. Oh, no, sorry. Thanks so much for having me. I'm still like, wow, so amazed that I am able to share so many stories of lived experiences from Seattle to New York. And who would have known that Step, Step, Jump would sum it all up for me? Who would have known that 3 words would say so much of my life story? Born and raised in Seattle, I hiked to the top of the Wall Street conversation. And I moved across the country to pursue my dreams and get paid well doing it. My life was normal until it was not. And I remember one Tuesday morning getting to work and realizing the stock market bell is going to ring and I am running late. So I was printing up all the portfolios, turning on the computers, and then all of a sudden I just feel something fall on my building and I was like, what was that? And then I feel an earthquake, but we're in New York. We're not in California. New York doesn't have earthquakes. There it is again. Well, maybe I should take cover under this desk. I know that if it's an earthquake, but we're supposed to take cover, but there was no space for me. Ay, Dios mío, ¿qué hago? And as I asked God, where should I do? Then all of a sudden, the whole office, all the sunshine went away and it was just gray. And then the goosebumps set in. And then this cold feeling of fear. And I knew, Annabelle, you gotta try to leave this building. So I did. And as I'm in the hallway, it was this jagged landscape. It was uneven, unpredictable. You know, my feet were like not catching the floor. And then my other leg, my knee was buckling. I couldn't reach the hallway. It's like the walls were close, but then so far away. And I finally get to the stairwell. I'm like, okay, I touched the doorknob, but I can't tell if it's hot or cold. I'm not supposed to open the door if it's hot. Well, maybe I should go somewhere else, I thought, and just calm down, Annabelle. So I told myself to calm down and I had to breathe. Breathe in, breathe out. And as I listened to my brain synapses, I could tell, okay, it's cold. I opened the door into the stairwell and no one's there. But now there's this invisible corrosive stench and I can't breathe. There's some fire too. So with all my might, I focus and I put my hand on the railing and I step with my left and I step with my right and I jumped and I step, jumped, step, jumped down 46 flights on September 11th. In the stairwell, I saw this beautiful African-American woman. She had this beautiful green emerald blouse. And she was so hysterical. And another lady who, she must have been, the only clothes she had was tied sweaters around her. And that one moment where I am looking eye to eye to our beloved firefighter. And I'm looking in his eyes, trying to see, is there an answer? What should we do? What's happening? And all I see is courageous acceptance. God bless him. God bless our firefighters. When I finally get to the ground, I turn around and I see all these flames and these plumes coming out of the building. I was like, oh no. So I hurried up and walked up Broadway. And when I got to Broadway and Canal, I got into a cab. And this gentleman, Anthony, thank God for nice people, he shared the cab with me. And so we're there in the cab and we finally go across Canal Street and everyone still didn't even know what was happening. And then we turn on 6th Avenue, which we call the Avenue of the Americas. And we look south and all of a sudden, there's only one tower there. And Anthony and I just lost it. We were like, the people. And him and I cried, screamed in the cab. We just couldn't believe, we didn't know what was happening. And in my mind, I was thinking, well, where are they gonna attack next? Where should we go? We were both heading up north. I was heading to the Bronx, I lived in the Bronx. And that was when I started realizing or asking myself, why does someone want to kill me? And just when you're in that sense making stage, everything you've learned just comes in a flash. And so remembering all that political science, all that history that I had read up on and loved, and I was like, oh, Anthony then tells me, they didn't want to kill you, they wanted to hurt us. I was like, hurt us? And that feeling of realizing that, oh yes, I'm part of a group. I am, oh yes, everything that the government has done, I'm a part of. Oh yeah, it's not just about me. It's a collective experience. It's just, all I could do was think about how conquered I had felt. That one of our cultural icons that represented prestige and power and wealth was gone. And I was just thinking about college class, because the closest thing I've ever experienced war was just reading about war, was in history class. And then thinking back, oh, this is how it must have felt for my indigenous ancestors, or, oh, this is how it must have felt also for my African ancestors, done by my European lineage. So it was a time of true emotional reckoning for me in that moment. And I'd like to read a passage. It was a generational ache that bloomed in my chest. A deep-seated trauma I'd inherited in my genetic code. One snippet of helix reserved for the map of my eyes, which shone bright like my father. One was for my curly brown hair, which looked just like my mom's. Another section held the memory of suffering, the dots and dashes of trauma from long ago. Colonialism is a true dirty word whose ash never seems to wash away. The forceful transfer of power never provides a clean break, because the country that takes control can never fully develop when it holds people under its thumb. When resources are exploited, not shared, when citizens remain shackled because of their skin or by law, progress is slow, real, and possible. Is this how my Ecuadorian ancestors felt when the Spanish invaded? Whoever flew those planes had picked the towers for a reason, to attack the epicenter of power and prestige, to target the tallest buildings in the Western Hemisphere, symbols and strongholds of wealth. But they stole more than that and ruined more than that. The structures themselves had fallen, revealing a vulnerability our city and our nation never know or believe existed. Our financial structure had stalled, choking on the ash that caked the streets. I wept for the people who had lost their lives as sacrifices to an unshared agenda, martyrs for a cause they hadn't signed up for. The despair I felt was total. The betrayal I felt was complete. As a woman of color, I had known slivers of it before. I had spent my life trying to realize my democratic power in this country, constantly fighting for economic prosperity, having just cracked through the widest, most male, oldest marketplace in the world. In that pursuit, the most frequent signpost was domination, injustice, and hypocrisy. Feelings of sadness derived from injustice weren't new to me, but I had always been buoyed up by the reminder of what I had been fighting for, the chance to find my place and to carve out my own path. I had always longed not only to realize my dreams, but also my own agency and power. Now I was realizing those were gone as well. You know, in this moment, you as you're sense making and as you're trying to understand why, you realize that all the history brings you to that present moment. And we sometimes tend to think history doesn't matter, or that it's boring. Why do I have to learn it? I hear that a lot from my daughters. But have you ever considered that us knowing our history and all of our histories allows us to look at the world differently and to actually choose to do something else? So I don't know who's in chat. I'd love to bring you all in. Can I see them?
Oh, sure. You sure can.
I'd love to.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's bring them in the room.
What we'll do is allow participants to turn their camera on if they choose to.
Great. Welcome. Come on in. Yeah, even if they want, but it's nice to just see who's all there. And I think we could do gallery. Yeah.
You know, I think we can allow folks to talk out loud. I don't know if I can make them visible. We're in a webinar setting.
Oh, so we can't see the tiles? We can't see their, oh, okay. Well, thank you, Yolanda, for coming. Thank you, Sylvia. Thank you, Tina. I appreciate it. Ginger, we can just scroll. I
Yeah,
always like
and
to
I'm
make
gonna
sure.
Allow folks to talk if they so choose.
Yeah, only
There we go. Okay.
Sharon, thank you for coming. Sally, Rosalie, Renee.
You could ask them to turn on the camera.
Yeah, I just wanted to see who's there because it's nice to kind of, I like to make sure. So as I'm in the cab, I finally go, I was in the cab all day long. I mean, there was everything. There was no buses, no trains. I was lucky I was in a cab. That was a huge blessing that Anthony has shared that with me. And when I finally get all the way uptown, which is Isham and Broadway, it's like the northern tip of Manhattan, I walk into this church and I'm just there and I'm just grateful. I'm breathing, I'm alive, and I'm just crying because I am so grateful for my life. All that could come out were tears. And all of a sudden, I don't know, who's ever put their hand in a river? Have you ever put your hand in a river and you can feel the current?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Perfect.
I wonder what the cab driver was thinking, and did he want to go somewhere? Did he have family he wanted to get to?
I know he didn't. Yeah. And he was African. He had like an African name. He was an African man. And he was just so nice. Even when I got out of the cab, he was like, "Are you sure?" And I was like, "Yes," because there's the bridge that connects Manhattan to the Bronx is the Broadway Bridge. It was a parking lot. Like, I mean, everyone was trying to leave. So I said, "No, thank you. This is far enough. I'll walk from here." So I don't know. I wish I could also thank him as well for taking me all the way up as close to home as possible. But when I was in the church, I felt that current in my wrist. And if it was like the layers of creation were pulled back, and I was like, this is always happening to our body. And in this traumatic day, I had experienced so much peace. I felt oneness with the pew that my hands were on, oneness with the stone walls. And then when I left the church, the sky, so Inwood Park, it's the last natural forest left in Manhattan. And so when I'm walking towards it, the trees and just, I realized how we are one human family. And that moment really made me realize, wow, how can we turn our backs on each other? And that's what led me to do my work in diversity, because I wanted to focus on what are the ideas that make us feel that we are separate from one another? What are those old mindsets? What are those things that shape laws and shape norms and make us think that we're different from one another? Because that day made me realize we're all one. And what I feel will impact you, and what you feel will impact you. And we're all co-creating this, our collective wellness. And so after that, though, I was a complete mess. I suffered from these 4-letter words, PTSD, that I didn't know anything about. All I knew was that I was crying all the time, praying on my knees, all the days of praying, and I wasn't getting better. I finally was able to see a mental therapist, and that helped somewhat, but not enough. So finally, I went back to my trees and mountains back home. I came back to Seattle and was able to do a 10-day meditation. So I was able to, it's called Vipassana. It's a methodology, and it basically allows you to watch your mind, like how the thoughts in your mind make you react, or it allows you to watch how emotions come up and your bodily sensations. So I realized, oh, there's these 3 things that make our human behavior: our mind, our emotions, our bodily sensations. And that dynamic Well, with PTSD, I was just getting triggered. I wasn't, I was just crying or yelling or being filled with rage. But sitting there, I realized, oh, I can choose to respond. I can realize that certain memories that replay bring up certain emotions and make my body feel a certain way, but I still am responsible for how I choose to respond. So that opened up so much for me and helped me understand my nature and what was going on with me. Practicing self-awareness, practicing self-reflection was huge for me to do on a daily basis to set myself up to even be able to show up for the day. I just want to read Marianne. Oh, Clay, he put amazing experience and so beautifully recounted. Thank you, Clay. And Marianne put, I'm reading your book and loving it. I admire your surety and planning to achieve your dreams and the way to scaffold yourself up. Right. Okay, she's in chapter 3, the September Fall. Thank you, Marianne. Thanks for buying my book. Then my dear friend, Carolyn, who we were both board members at a nonprofit. Before I had moved to New York, we were board members of a nonprofit called Everyone Has a Song, and it was helping youth through music. And she's East Van Cherokee and was taught how to do a sweat lodge. Her teacher is Lakota. So she's like, I think you should join us for the sweat lodge. And I was like, I don't even know what that is. But I made healing my priority. And one of the things that I realized was whether it was meditating or going forward with the sweat lodge, I had to put my healing first and try new things. And that required me to jump into my cultural blind spots. Because growing up, I grew up in a very conservative home, Seventh-day Adventist Protestant. There was no meditating, there was no sweat lodge, none of that. Even me being Latino and being indigenous, none of that was part of my home life. And so it's something completely new, right? I mean, it's scary. I mean, how many of us feel scared, like, okay, I've never done this before, it's woo-woo, or it's this or that, and we may or may not try it because of our upbringing, but I needed help. So we get to Indianola, and it's a beautiful area. I don't know if you guys know the area over there. And Carolyn begins. And there's this dome made of willows and blankets, and then all of a sudden we're crawling on the ground, and then I hear, and she speaks to the 4 directions, and that drum, she starts to sing. And we all, as little kids, we start to pray. And we take turns praying. And as she pours on the water on the rocks, all the steam comes up. There I was with a group of people. I only knew who she was. And then I realized, wow, this feels so comforting. It was like being back in my mother's womb. And I realized that Mother Earth wasn't just a thing. But that she was conscious, and all of a sudden, all this trauma she transmutes and takes away from my body. I would have never in my life, if Carolyn would have ever told me that Mother Earth is or this, and I would have never probably even have tried and participated in the sweat lodge. It was, I had the understanding of my human nature through the ancient Eastern medicine, the Vipassana. But then being in the Lakota sweat lodge, it healed my body. So that was one thing that I did learn, was that although there are many different modalities of healing, we also have to focus on our body and our energetic selves. I don't know if any of you have ever participated in a temazcal or a sweat lodge. Okay.
Maybe somebody on chat.
Yeah. Has anyone online ever experienced one? Mm-hmm. And Marcy wrote, I'm listening to your book and appreciate you as a narrator. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Having this time to share my story, and that was the day and months following. But one thing I will say is that healing takes time. It's something that we have to work on. And also us being able to listen to different experiences and different histories and looking at our history in different lenses allows us to come together in a way that will allow us to make new choices, right? Like, I feel so honored that I can be here with you all, that you're willing to listen to my many stories, which for some people, you know, is completely different. And that's, I think we all contribute to this puzzle. By sharing our story, it's like we're putting one little piece together for this puzzle. And my hope is that by me sharing my story, that all of you also share yours, so that we can put that piece towards our greater puzzle and bring it all together. So I want to thank you all. And I'd love to take some questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Lovely.
What would be a
Lovely.
picture you have of a way for us to share more, either now, tonight, or a later time with other people?
Oh, well, I think Elizabeth's been putting up the link, I think, in the chat. And so people can sign up for like an email list that I'll, you know, if they want to either listen to do another book reading, or I do diversity workshops, or I even help with storytelling with people who want to storytell as well. But yeah, they can just reach me at stepstepjump.com.
Great.
Hope to see some. A separate question.
Mm-hmm.
When you were in the cab, that sounds like a really positive, powerful, microcosm of you and Anthony, is that his name? And the cab driver. Did he talk to you, the cab driver? Now, I don't know about Anthony, what his background was, but did you guys share some of that?
The only time, well, with Anthony and I, we had a dialogue. So he was he was working on a construction site on the Federal Reserve building. And so he left the work site. His boss didn't want him to leave. And his boss was basically like, you're gonna get fired if you leave. And he's like, I don't care, I'm leaving.
Yeah.
And so he left, and then, and I think he was Italian-American, I'm not sure, but he lived in Queens, and that's about as much as I know. I'd love to thank him. And then the taxi driver, I don't know his name. I knew he was African, I could tell from the spelling and his accent. But when we were on Canal and Church Street, there was, we were at a stoplight. And I was like, okay, I wanna go. I was freaking out. And the light turned green. And then all of a sudden I was like, okay, go. And he said, no, the people. And this whole like stampede of people just came and swelled the intersection. They almost all got ran over by cars because no one could see. And then there was a white plume behind them. And then we realized, well, we didn't know what the plume was, but he basically, he locked the door because I was like, oh no, like at first I was gonna get out, and then he locked it. He's like, no, don't get out, don't open the door. And then once the white plume was coming, people were just trying to go in anywhere they could, into stores. And I mean, people did try to open the cab door. I was, he had the controls, right? But in hindsight, then thinking about everyone who had so many health complications because of the plume, I didn't, and he helped all of us stay alive and not have all that cancer. And who would have known, right? Who would have known? But that cab driver did a lot to keep us sound and healthy.
At what point did you just figure out what was going on? Because you didn't have a news source, did you?
No. So it was ongoing. So it wasn't like there was one moment in the day that we really knew. I didn't know it all throughout the day. So even when we were in the stairwell at the time, and if anyone has a question, please feel free to put it in the chat. I'd love to answer your questions or any comments.
Yeah, and also you should be able to join with your voice. If you want to unmute yourself, you may try to share your question verbally to us as well.
So when I was in the stairwell, at that time, none of the cell phones worked, but people had two-way pagers. And so one of the guys who worked more like the operations, the facilities, he had a two-way pager, and then he told us they hit our building. Well, we knew they hit our building, but then he said they hit another plane hit the other building. And we were all, it like filled up the whole stairwell. And that's when we realized, oh, it's not an accident. And so that was one part. But then while we were in the cab, we were just afraid. Like I remember even the cab took us through Grand Central. And I was losing it. I was like, how can you take us through Grand Central? That's like another prime target. But I mean, I was like, how could you do that? And because I was freaked out and I figured it was gonna, we were in a state of war. So it wasn't until the next day that I realized both of the towers had fallen. Yeah. And I think, okay.
A couple other questions there.
Yeah. In your book, this is from Marcy. Oh, the first one.
Yeah.
How did you see God's intervention? Wow. The first time when I was in the office and I said, ay Dios mío, ¿qué hago? And then all the sunshine had gone away, and that me listening to the sign. So I think sometimes we ask ourselves, even if we don't believe in God, right? We ask ourselves, oh, what should I do? We get a sign and then we're like, I don't want to do that. I mean, who's done that, right? So I don't feel like the answer was too quick. You know, we need more time, right? Like all these ways that we talk ourselves out of it. So it was huge. And then I'd say also throughout, like during the 10-day sit, I did experience my energy, which I'm like, yeah, I read it in a science book, but actually experiencing yourself at a cellular level, that's a whole other experience. And I did that during the 10-day sit. And then also in the sweat lodge, having that whole holistic experience that I never had before. So I'd say that it was consistent. And I'd say that whether it's the divine universe energy, you know, however we want to name God, that what I found is you do need moments of silence and you do need to make yourself available and listen. If you're talking too much, if you always have self-doubt, if you're too much in the physical and want proof, you're gonna miss it. So that's one thing that me going with my intuition and seeing the answer and feeling it and being like, okay, I gotta go. I gotta leave this office. I was afraid. And I think that's why in my mind, I had to face death just to take that step in the hallway, because I was already afraid. But I think I had to face the worst case scenario in my mind just to be able to go down the hallway and get to the stairwell. Next question. You talked about getting to work late that day, about seeing your boss's sweater on his chair, but did you see him or his son? Where were they in the building? Did they survive? Yeah. So the son, George, he was at an analyst conference in Midtown, and his dad was actually swimming. So there were the towers, and then they had the Hyatt that was part of Tower 2. He heard something and got out of the pool. He actually had gone swimming, but then when he left, unfortunately, that's when there was a glass ceiling on top of the pool. So as he was leaving, his son did tell me that he saw a lot of things he shouldn't have seen. But I never got to speak to him about it. We just never talked about it. It's too painful. Have you since returned to New York to reflect on your experience and visit the museum? Yeah, the 20th anniversary, I was planning on going to New York, but yes, I have gone to New York since then. Absolutely. Like I still lived in New York. So even though I went back here the fall of 2001, I went back to New York, and I actually, one chapter is called The New New York. And I continued modeling. I ended up on a billboard on Harlem on 125th Street. So that was fun. And I lived there until 2008, 2008, 2009. And then I moved back to Seattle. But I did visit New York, you know, I think the last time I was there was 2019, but I was trying to go for the 20th anniversary, but with COVID and everything, it was just, and my daughter's school schedule, it was just too complicated. But it was something that I had wanted to do, and I wasn't able to, because now I don't even think the museum's open anymore.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Not open.
Mm-mm. Yeah. Any other questions?
Any questions here from the?
Or any feedback? How was, you know, I'd love to just, or I mean, my question is like, where is everyone on September 11th if they're old enough, right? Like it just depends on age, but I think that everyone remembers that day. I don't necessarily feel like we've been able to heal from the day. Like I feel sometimes that because I didn't want to share my story I wanted it to help people and to bring people together. I didn't want to share it to divide people and to like have people angry, right? And I think there was so much anger in these years, like in the wars and everything. And so I don't know though if as a collective we've been able to process the grief. I think it turned into anger and rage, and then we've been in wars, and then that's been our solution, but there wasn't really like a full healing. And you see that with like the Islamophobia and just so much, you know, conflict, you know, between religions, which they all come from Abraham. I don't understand it, but I mean, the three religions, I call them the Abrahamic religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, they all came from Abraham. So you would think that there'd be more peace between the three, but it's, yeah, it's hoping for that.
Yeah.
I know there are more questions coming in for you, but I wanted to just comment that I read your book right after I met you. But you have helped me feel the effect on all of us in your book. It helped me look at it differently. I was at home getting ready for work and listening to the radio, as I always do, and there was a news bulletin about something awful happening in New York. And I went on, and then pretty soon I yell out to my husband, I said, I think you better turn on the television, because by then the second tower had been hit. So I'm just hearing news flashes. And then of course, we thought of war also, but it took a while before we get all these details. But and in your book, it helped me revisit that it wasn't just me, it was all these people in New York and the families of those men who committed suicide in two of those buildings. Mm-hmm. So your words help a lot, and that's, I think you're honoring those on those questions.
Thank you, Dorothy. Thank you. May I ask if you felt the building shake during the impact? Yes, I definitely felt, I felt something fall on my building, and I thought that another building had fallen like that, because it was like this. And then I'm in this chair just like this, and I'm rolling back and forth. Thank goodness there was like, I was in a cubicle, or I would have kept rolling. But yes, I definitely felt, and I was in Tower 1, so the plane hit on the top part of Tower 1. It hit Cantor Fitzgerald. Yeah, I think it was
Cantor Fitzgerald, yeah. What floor were you on?
46.
46, okay. And Cantor Fitzgerald, what did they say? They were on like 102nd or something, or?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Amazing recounting.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Where were you that day?
I, believe it or not, I was in Istanbul, Turkey, and I was walking down Istiklal, which is a kind of a, you know, a touristy shopping street. And I was in a scarf shop, and, you know, when you're in another country and you're in the markets and stuff, sometimes there's lots of touts trying to get your attention and sell you different things. And I was very excited about that. And I was getting scarves from my grandma. And I went into a shop, and the first thing that the proprietor said to me, a beautiful shop of scarves and silks and just very beautiful things visually. He said, I'm so sorry about your country. I'm so sorry about what happened to your country. And I immediately felt that somebody was trying to get, you know, he was trying to get my attention and, you know, sell me something or do, you know, I didn't know. And he said, no, I'm serious. And he turned the TV in his shop toward me, and I saw footage of the two towers and one of them falling, and I was just horrified. And I ran back to my hotel.
Wow. Wow.
It was just amazing, you know, to be, and what was so interesting about being in that country on that day was that when that happened, on the way back to my hotel, I sensed that something earth-shaking had happened to the whole world. And I realized that I might not be able to go, I don't know, I was as a tourist to a restaurant or anything like that. So I sort of went from small little fruit shop to bakery shop and just trying to get what I could, food for the person I was staying with, because I knew we might be held up for a couple of days. And it was so interesting because in one shop, I would receive an apology. So we're so sorry about what happened to your country. And I'd be dashing to another shop to get some water or some fruits with whatever they had. And I would hear the grandfather, because, you realize you're in the middle of, you're sort of you're in the Middle East, but you're not really, Turkey is a NATO country. So some of the older generation were cheering what was happening on TV because they were mad at the US. So I saw multiple perspectives actually, and the youth offering their apology, and sometimes other generations cheering because they were mad at the US. So it was a confusing time trying to get back to even my hotel there.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah.
But
And
I was
that's
just
I talk about that confusion even for myself. In the book as well, thinking of, like I said, our collective history that, I've been ashamed of, but I am definitely, we're all a part of that, right? And how we can, what we can do about that, right? So I definitely take you on that journey as well. Here's another, thank you, Clay.
Thank you so much. This is an amazing sharing.
Thanks. Thank you. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to go to the next question. I think it's, what do you remember of the walk back to the Bronx? What do you remember of the people alongside you? I was in the cab. I actually remember Harlem more than the Bronx. The Bronx was already, besides crossing the Broadway Bridge, which was like a parking lot, there wasn't that many people walking around in the Bronx at all, but there were still a lot of people in Harlem when I was in the cab, and I passed the Arturo Alfonso Schomburg Center, and it's a museum similar to this. It's all about dedicated, the history, but it's of Black life in America. And he's actually Afro-Boriqueño, as I call it. Boricua is Puerto Rican, so Afro-Latino, Afro-Puerto Rican. And the youth there, I remember there were a couple of guys on the corner and the cab had stopped, and they looked, and they looked at me, and I was just like crying, miserable, and I remember the older guy was like, "Oh, you were down there." And it's only, you're like 3 feet away. The window was open. It was a hot day. I was in the cab like all day long. It's already like 2 PM. I didn't eat anything, drink anything, nothing. And so he's like 3 feet away from me, and he's like, "You were down there." Just the fact that he could see that in me. And he was just, he's like, and then I remember them crossing, and they were like, "It's Armageddon," they're like 13, 14-year-olds, right? African-American young men. But I remember that, wow, like for him to be able to see that I was so troubled, and for him to speak to it. So that's one thing that I remember, and I do share in the book too. I think that was Nancy. Am I gonna write another book? I hope so, but I have to say I did write this during COVID. And so I had lots of time. I do have 2 daughters, and it did, in terms of struggling with PTSD, it helped me kind of explain with what my daughters were going through with COVID and not being able to go to school and the shutdown and the masks, and all of that was in a sense like another type of war in a strange way, because now it wasn't a physical attack, but it was a biological one. And so I think because I have that experience, I'd say I'm much more honest with my daughters about life and things. And I'm like, well, they say this, but it could be that, or you never know. Like I knew it was going to be a long time when COVID had happened. I was like, if there's not a unified plan and different states doing different things, it's going to take a while. But it wasn't until I was in the grocery store and there was no food on the shelf that I was like, I remember feeling like white, like I mean, and so I would go grocery shopping, and it was tough. I'd say during COVID, it was really tough. I definitely, meditated and was helping other people meditate and really find peace and really focus. Like I always say, don't misuse your imagination and worry, right? Like you can only control what yourself and how you feel, and everything else is out of your control. And I think that's one thing that PTSD has taught me, was like, I can only control how I choose to respond, but there's outside forces that things will happen and the world will shift and change. And my job is to, well, especially as a mom, be as strong and also as nurturing, but also generative, find ways to create my own energy and my own happiness. What did you take when you left your office? My purse and my cardigan sweater. I actually left my breakfast and my juice, and I so wish I had it because I was stuck in the cab all day. Yeah, and I didn't have cash on me because I only had a card, and everything electrical was turned off. So Anthony actually gave me his last bit of cash to give to the taxi driver, and the taxi driver drove me well beyond that amount of money. But yeah, so that's all I took with me. I was hosting, okay, so Marianne, I think, is sharing. I was hosting some women from Africa who were supposed to be at the UN and NYC that day, but something required us to change their schedule, so they flew into New York LaGuardia 3 or 4 days later. They were amazed at how much, so much was still working. I was left with the thought that people at Ground Zero had their lives changed forever, and the rest of us resumed our lives, though we were too changed in various ways. Yeah. I don't know if you want to go on, if you want to share something, Marianne, if you want to unmute yourself, or that's a phenomenal, reflection. I think even for my family, because I wasn't physically hurt, they just thought I was fine. Because especially in the Latino culture, I mean, even mental wellness or seeing a mental therapist isn't a thing. It's only now becoming that culturally. So so there was a lot there that I agree with. It resonates.
Did you experience any survivor's guilt?
Oh yeah, that put me into depression, and oh yeah, that was the worst. And that's why I think, out of reverence, I took it as, let me have reverence for the people that passed and not share my story. And that's how I took it. And it wasn't until I started sharing my story that people said, no, people need to hear, because there's other people that have gone through that or worse. And when we hear their story, there's a part of you that heals, that evolves, and then it helps other people share something that happened to them. Oh, how do I unmute myself?
And I think you
Never
yeah.
mind.
are you there?
Oh yeah, if you can turn up your volume.
Oh, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you. You might need to speak up a little bit louder.
Oh, yeah, I was really struck by my African friend's comment that everything worked in spite of this huge catastrophe that happened, that we all we were able to resume our airplane flights and our trains and our driving and our work everywhere but in New York City. And they said if this had happened anywhere else in the world, the whole country would have been paralyzed. So, it kind of tells you about this infrastructure we have that we never think about, that holds us together. And it's the physical infrastructure, but it's also this psychological infrastructure that holds all Americans together. And I never saw so many people coming together at that time. I haven't seen it since.
Yeah.
And that's the only thing I'm sad about, is that I wish we would come together again.
I
But
know.
Not over something so horrendous and unhappy.
Right.
Yeah, I agree with you too, and it makes me sad too. I think that's why even when I do equity work and I'm trying to build a foundation of understanding, I want people to understand each other, even if we don't agree. Like, I want us to hear the different reasons why we approach life differently, having that conversation and really just realizing, okay, yes, we all want to approach it differently, but we still want our lives to be generative and healthy for each other. And it does, I mean, there's just a lot there that I'm with you there in terms of, like, I wish we were more compassionate towards each other, and that we realize, like, life is such a gift. It's like, it's such a blessing. And so why make it difficult for one another? We should, like, add to people's joy, not make it worse. So, yeah, I think we'll get there. I know that it's especially the last few years, we've really gotten separated, but I think people really want community now. And people realize that even infrastructure is not community, right? Like, corporations in downtown, you still need people. People still have to come together to make art, to connect, to enjoy food and celebrate life. And I hope that we remember that moving forward. Marilyn, how's your health? Actually, really good. Yeah, I have a certification in holistic health, so I am pretty good. I got injured in the fall of 2019. So when I was writing my book, I was healing. So when I don't know if you can hear that, but when I was writing my book, I was healing. So it's been a journey, but besides an injury and healing from that, yeah, really good. Thank you for asking. How are we on time?
Well, we're just after 7.
Oh, okay.
We're just after 7, a few minutes. It's hard to end a conversation like this. Dorothy,
Did you want to say anything? You.
Oh, no.
Okay. How about you, Phil?
Well, the day that happened, I had taken my wife to the airport to fly on a business trip to New York. And I came back after I left her off, and I was at the gym on a treadmill, and my sister-in-law called me from Chicago. There were no TVs in the gym. My sister-in-law called me from Chicago. She said, "You got to look at the TV. What's going on?" So I went back to the house and I turned on the TV and I saw all this. And I said, "What's going on?" So my first thing I did was to call the airlines and say, well, what's happening? And they said, we don't have any information. We don't have any information. But keep calling back if you want to. So I sat there and watched that for a while and then kept calling. And the TV said that they had turned the airplanes around to go back to where they'd taken off from. So I thought, well, that's positive. So I kept calling the airport and they said, yes, your flight has been turned around in Denver and it's coming back to Seattle. So I went down and spent 2 hours in the red light in lobby watching the TV.
Wow.
And sooner or later, my wife got off the plane and she called me and she said, what's going on? Because the pilot had said nothing. He said, there has been an incident and we're going back to Seattle. So she had no clue. And so I said, well, and then the airport was closed. I couldn't even get to the airport for another hour or so. And then she found out what the whole thing was.
Oh my goodness. They probably didn't want everyone to panic.
Well, I
Yeah.
panicked when I heard the other plane.
Yeah.
You know, that, whoa, what's going on? But anyway, worked out fine.
Good, I'm glad. I'm glad she wasn't in New York, that it didn't make it that far.
I'm really glad that you're encouraging this kind of conversation tonight and continuing, because these kind of conversations are making me think about the day that Kennedy died. And of course, we all worried about the supposed Russian who supposedly killed him. We were sure that Russia was coming after us. We were all going to die from some kind of a war with Russia. And so, you know, this is just things that we come to our minds and we have to deal with them, choose to deal with them. I was pregnant with my first baby at the time, and I had lots of uneasiness about that sort of thing. If our country is falling apart, where does that leave me and my baby? So it's really good to think about those things. Thank you for encouraging us to do that.
Welcome. Thank you for bringing that up too, about Kennedy, because even when I watch documentaries, I'm always impacted by that. I can't imagine how that must have been.
What did you say earlier? I was going to try to remember that. We have to watch our imagination.
Not misuse our imagination and worry.
Yes.
So I had to say that a lot to my daughters, to like, don't let the story go on and create all these bad scenarios in your mind, because that's a misuse of your imagination. Because it is, it's just an imagination. None of it happened, right? And that's worry. I forget the gentleman, I'm quoting a gentleman, I forget his name, so it's not mine. But I had to tell my daughters that a lot. And also for them to just realize, well, at least you could learn. At least you have a computer and we're home safe. And I go, if we were in another country that has a war, they don't have school, they are not safe. And, you know, it's like, you know, the three of us were all female too. So it's like, this is an amazing thing. I was like, so I try to point out that how bad it could be and be grateful for how good we have it, right? And just to kind of give some context for them. So yeah, but did you want to say something, Clay?
Oh, no, I was just, you know, hemming and hawing, remembering the experience.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you all. Thank you,
Yeah.
Cheryl and Ginger. We can go through their names if that's okay, because I'd love to. I really appreciate you all, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on my book. And if you are interested in me speaking at your company or at a retreat, I'd love to do that. So Rosalie, Ginger, Sylvia.
They were trying to get through there. Scroll down.
Yeah, Marianne. Thank you, Dan. Thank you for joining us. Christine, Ginny, Greg, Alicia, thank you so much. Jackie, Janine, Jean, Linda, Marcy, Kathy, May.
Elizabeth,
Thank you, Nancy.
you shut down the recording.
Thanks so much.
Looks like-
Thank you.
Hi, thank you.
I would like to hear you talk more about your hip hop. I love that section of the book. And when I first read it, I thought, that's not what this book is about. But I learned what was to you.
Yeah.
Yes, and how you used it and later in your life.
Yeah.
I had to look up what a B-girl was though.
It's a break dancer.
Yeah. And I was trying to visualize you as a break dancer, so if you ever have a show, let us know.
Yeah, I just did a mambo to hip hop dance history class.
Really?
So I talk about the history of what was happening from the 1930s to the 1970s, and then I teach moves, salsa moves and then hip hop moves and the correlation between the two.
Did you have a camera there?
Yeah, if you're on Instagram, I have, yeah. I just did it like a couple weeks ago.
Oh.
And then I judged a competition at the University of Washington Hip Hop Association.
Really?
Lovely.
Yeah, so,
Lovely.
yeah.
There's a
So,
lot of music connections here in West Seattle
yeah.
with hip hop and so forth, so. Well, we'll tune into that another way.
Yeah, it's a good workout.
Oh, that was really
Wonderful.
good.
Oh, thank you, Marianne. Oh, yeah, I know. I wonder, can you put your email, Marianne, in the chat? Maybe there's a way that,
Sure, yeah, she can go right ahead and we can capture that, and send that right to you.
See, look, they're gonna buy your
I
book now.
can't, yeah, thanks, Clay. And then I have an audio book on my website. So if you want to listen to it, sometimes some people just, the driving, the commute, they're
Yeah.
like, I don't have time to read, but I'll listen to an audio book. I was like, okay, great.
Howard, you might tell them, don't read this chapter and this chapter while you're driving, because people would be going.
Yeah.
I felt that when you first started your presentation tonight, that kind of, oh my gosh. And I'd already read your book, which is very, very detailed.
Right, thank you. We've
Thank
got
you.
her email.
Oh,
too, so,
wonderful.
Yeah,
So
Okay.
how do I,
I can capture this and
Oh,
get
you
that
can,
to you.
perfect.
Yeah,
Thank
absolutely.
you.
So,
Thanks so much.
thank you.
I appreciate it. Thank you all.
So,
Take
Tasha,
care.
any parting words, any final words to
No,
wrap up the night?
I've shared them all.
Okay.
Thank you guys. I'm sorry the group was not bigger, but it's always good what it is. Yeah, the conversation.
All right,
Bye.
thank you.
You can unmute, say goodbye. Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
you.
Southwest Historical Society.
Elizabeth?
Thank you.